Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into a bizarre historical event that, honestly, sounds like it belongs straight in the realm of internet creepypasta. But I promise you, this is completely real, it's exceptionally well documented, and it reveals a pretty terrifying truth about human psychology. Today, we are unpacking the Tanganyika Laughter Epidemic, a fatal psychological glitch. Let's explore exactly what happens when the human mind just breaks.
Section 1. A medical mystery and a terrifying reality.
Okay, I want you to just imagine for a second that you're sitting in class, or maybe at your desk at work, and a friend tells a joke, and it's a good one. Not necessarily the funniest joke you've ever heard in your life, but enough to get a really solid belly laugh out of you. Now imagine that you just keep laughing. You laugh through the entire next hour, you laugh all the way through dinner, you laugh until your ribs are aching and your lungs are literally burning. You are begging your own brain to just stop, but it won't. That laughter just keeps going for hours, then days, and then weeks, until you literally collapse from sheer exhaustion. I mean, it sounds like a deleted scene from a psychological horror movie, right? The stark contrast between the joy we normally associate with laughter and the complete, terrifying physical breakdown of the human body is just chilling. But back in 1962, this wasn't a movie. This was reality.
Section 2. The Kinshasa outbreak and where it all began.
The chronological spread of this thing is honestly fascinating. It all kicked off on January 30th, 1962, at a mission-run boarding school for girls in the village of Kinshasa. That's in what is now modern-day Tanzania. It started with just 3 students. And at first, teachers probably just assumed they were being disruptive teenagers. But then, within a few weeks, 95 out of the 159 students were affected. And we're not talking about a little giggle here. It was uncontrollable, convulsive laughter lasting anywhere from a few hours to 16 straight days. The school was completely overwhelmed and ultimately forced to close down. But instead of containing the problem, the girls simply went home and took a quote-unquote infection with them, spreading it to the village of Nshamba and then moving way beyond. To put the scale of this into perspective, by the time this epidemic finally began to wane, over 1,000 people had been struck by this contagious, unyielding laughter. Over 1,000. Several entire school systems had to remain shut down for months just to try and hit the brakes on the spread. It's really easy from a modern standpoint to hear laughter epidemic and think it sounds kind of fun. But I really want to ground us in the horrifying human element here. These people were not happy. They were actively suffering. Just imagine being a parent in a village where your child is screaming with laughter, but their eyes are completely full of absolute terror because they are physically incapable of stopping. People were fainting from a lack of oxygen, they were having severe respiratory issues, and they were breaking out in these massive stress-induced rashes. It was a very real, very terrifying medical crisis.
Section 3. Searching for a cause among medical dead ends.
So doctors arrive on the scene, and naturally, they immediately start looking for a physical culprit. Was there something weird in the water? Was it a new virus? They completely investigated the local food supplies for toxins. They looked for localized environmental triggers. They even tested for a variation of sleeping sickness, which is similar to the one that turned people into literal statues back in the 1920s. But guess what? Every single one of these physical tests turned up absolutely nothing. They were complete dead ends. No virus, no toxin. Section 4. The psychological glitch and the true culprit. All right, so what were they actually dealing with? Well, it turns out it was a textbook, classic example of mass psychogenic illness, which historically was often called mass hysteria. You see, our brains are fundamentally social organs. We possess these incredible things called mirror neurons, which cause us to subconsciously mimic the behaviors of the people around us. It's the exact same reason you involuntarily yawn when you see someone else yawn across the room. But in this case, that totally natural mimicry was completely hijacked. And that hijacking happens through a psychological mechanism called conversion. To really get this, we have to look at the context of Tanganyika in 1962. The country had literally just gained its independence, so the social, cultural, and environmental pressure placed on these young students at the mission school was absolutely immense. Conversion happens when the brain simply reaches a breaking point from all that intense stress, and it translates or converts that mental agony into a literal physical symptom. Instead of having a collective panic attack, their brains essentially converted that overwhelming stress into a reflex laugh that they simply couldn't turn off. It was a psychological glitch that went viral in a very literal, pre-internet way. And the really wild part? This illustrates a much larger historical pattern. If we compare the 1962 Tanganyika event, where people laughed until they literally fainted, with the infamous 1518 dancing plague in Strasbourg, where people literally danced until their feet bled and their hearts gave out, we see the exact same glitch at work. It is a stark, undeniable reminder that we are all social animals. We are far, far more vulnerable to groupthink, collective behavior, and subconscious mimicry than we ever like to admit.
Section 5. Our vulnerable minds and a lingering existential dread.
The Tanganyika Laughter Epidemic eventually just vanished. Poof. Much in the same way it started. But it leaves behind some pretty heavy questions. It completely challenges our illusion of total choice. We love to believe that we are in complete control of our bodies and our actions, right? But stories like this, especially when you pair them with modern split-brain experiments, highly suggest that our conscious mind might just be a sort of interpreter, trying to make sense of subconscious modules running in the background. It proves there is a massive amount going on under the hood of our own minds that we simply do not understand, and more importantly, do not control. Now, you might be thinking, well, that was a village in 1962. We're way past that. But we really have to connect the dots to our modern digital world here. We might think we're immune, but we live in a highly polarized world driven by algorithms. And these algorithms are intentionally designed to place us into insulated information bubbles. Those bubbles are, in essence, modern vectors for contagious group behavior. We are constantly being exposed to the digital equivalent of that laughing classroom. Honestly, we might just be a few specific stressors away from the next weird psychological event.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to wrap up today's explainer. What are you catching from the crowd? We might not be laughing uncontrollably in the streets, but our beliefs, our anxieties, and our behaviors are constantly being shaped by the collective hysteria of the digital spaces we inhabit. It's absolutely vital to step back and reflect on our own psychological vulnerabilities. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating glitch in human history. Go out there, keep questioning what you see, and take care of yourselves.